George was a 50-year-old man who lived alone in a small town in America. His life was simple, quiet, and filled with long, empty evenings. Every morning, he woke up early, made himself a cup of black coffee, and walked to his small job at a repair shop. He didn't earn much money, but he never complained. Still, something was missing: love. George had never been married. When he was younger, he dreamed of having a family, of coming home to someone waiting for him. But as the years passed, that dream started to fade away. Many times, he tried to find a partner, but every woman he met walked away after learning he didn't have money or a big house. People often said, "You're a good man, George, but life is hard without money." Those words stayed in his heart like a wound that never healed. At night, he would sit by his window, watching the streetlights glow and couples walking together, hand in hand. He wondered what it would feel like to have someone love him, not for wealth, but for who he was inside. Sometimes he talked to himself softly, saying, "Maybe love isn't made for people like me." Yet deep inside, he still hoped. He believed that one day, someone would see his heart before seeing his wallet. George wasn't angry at the world. He just felt forgotten, like a kind man living in the wrong time. His neighbors barely noticed him. His friends had moved away. And every night before sleeping, he whispered a small prayer. "God, please, if love still exists in this world, let it find me before I leave this earth." George always believed that love was about the heart, not about money. But the world kept proving him wrong. Every time he tried to meet someone, he faced rejection, not because he was unkind or rude, but because he was poor. He joined dating sites, went to small community gatherings, and even asked his friends to introduce him to someone. At first, women liked him. He was polite, respectful, and had a warm smile that made people feel safe. But everything changed when they learned about his job and income. One woman said kindly, "You're nice, George, but I need stability in life." Another laughed softly and said, "You're too simple. I'm looking for someone successful." Those words broke his heart, one piece at a time. Every rejection made him feel smaller. He started thinking maybe money really was everything. He wasn't ugly, he wasn't lazy, but still, no one wanted to share life with him. The pain grew quietly inside him. He would smile during the day, pretending everything was fine, but at night, tears filled his tired eyes. Sometimes, George sat at his small wooden table, looking at the old clock on the wall, thinking how fast time was passing. He was already 50, and love still hadn't come. He wondered, will anyone ever love a poor man like me? People around him often said, if you had money, things would be different. And slowly, he started to believe them. But deep down, he still wished the world could see love the way he did, pure and simple. That night, as he turned off the lights and lay on his cold bed, one thought echoed in his mind. Maybe I don't need to be rich to find love. Maybe I just need to be strong enough to keep believing in it. One cold night, George sat alone in his small apartment. The sound of the rain outside filled the silence. He looked at his reflection in the mirror, tired eyes, wrinkled face, and hands that told stories of hard work and struggle. He whispered to himself, I'm 50, and I've spent my whole life waiting for love that never came. He felt broken, but something inside him refused to give up. That night, he made a promise to himself. He said, I may be poor today, but I will not stay this way forever. I will work hard, I will change my life, and I will never let anyone make me feel small again. He didn't want money to show off. He wanted to prove that effort, honesty, and patience could build a better life. George sat down with a notebook and started writing his plan. He listed the few skills he had: fixing old furniture, repairing wooden chairs, polishing tables. It wasn't much, but it was a start. The next morning, he woke up early and went out to find used furniture. He borrowed tools from a friend and began working in his small garage. Every nail he hammered, every chair he fixed, reminded him of his promise. It wasn't easy. His back hurt, his hands bled, and sometimes he didn't sell anything for days. But every night before sleeping, he looked at the mirror and said, "One day, George, one day, everything will change." He didn't know when that day would come, but his heart was full of determination. He stopped waiting for miracles. He started creating them. From that night on, George was no longer the poor man waiting for love. He was the man who promised himself a new beginning. George's life slowly started to change after the promise he made to himself. Every morning, he woke up before sunrise, made a cup of cheap black coffee, and went straight to his small garage. That old, dusty space became his world. It wasn't just a workshop, it was the place where his new life began. He started by repairing broken chairs and tables that people threw away. He cleaned them, fixed them, and polished them until they looked new again. At first, no one cared about his work. He sold each piece for just a few dollars, barely enough to buy food. But George didn't stop. He kept going day after day with faith in his heart. His neighbors often said, "Why work so hard at this age?" But George only smiled and replied softly, "Because dreams don't have an age." Slowly, people began to notice his skill. A local shop owner bought a few of his pieces and displayed them. Customers liked them and asked for more. Orders started to come in, small at first, but steady. George's hard work was beginning to speak louder than words. He started saving money carefully. He didn't buy fancy things. He bought better tools, stronger wood, and new paint. He learned how to design new furniture by watching free videos online at night. His hands became rough, but his heart felt alive again. Sometimes he still sat alone after a long day, his body tired but his soul proud. He would whisper, "This is just the beginning." And it truly was. That small garage, once empty and cold, now carried the sound of hope, the sound of a man rebuilding his life with faith, sweat, and patience. George was no longer just surviving. He was becoming something greater, a man of purpose. Years passed, and George's hard work finally began to show real results. His small furniture garage had grown into a little workshop, and people all around town started to know his name. His pieces were different, strong, beautiful, and made with love. He didn't just build furniture, he built trust. One morning, a businessman visited his shop. He had heard about George's honest work and offered him a big contract to design furniture for a local hotel. George couldn't believe it. His hands shook when he signed the papers. That one order changed everything. He worked harder than ever before. For weeks, he barely slept. He wanted everything to be perfect. When the hotel opened, people admired his work and asked who made it. That's how George's business started growing faster than he ever dreamed. Soon, he hired helpers, bought new machines, and moved his workshop to a larger place. The same man who once struggled to buy bread was now running his own company. George never forgot those nights when he went hungry or cried alone. Those memories kept him humble. But now life felt different. He wore clean clothes, drove a small car, and people started to respect him. Some of the same neighbors who once ignored him now greeted him with smiles. George was proud, but not proud of the money, proud of the journey. One evening, he stood outside his new workshop, watching the sunset. The golden light touched his face as he whispered, "You did it, George. You really did it." That moment was his turning point, the moment he realized success doesn't come overnight. It grows slowly, like a seed that finally blooms after years of care. George's dream had come true. But deep inside, one dream still remained, the dream of true love. George's life had completely changed. The man who once fixed broken chairs in a dusty garage was now the proud owner of a successful furniture company. He had money, respect, and comfort, everything he once dreamed of. But one thing was still missing: love. Now that he was rich, things began to feel strange. Suddenly, people started noticing him everywhere he went. Women who once ignored him now smiled when they saw him. Even young girls, some just 22 or 23, tried to talk to him. They called him handsome, strong, and a true gentleman. At first, George felt happy. After all, who doesn't like attention? But slowly, he began to feel something wasn't right. Their words sounded sweet, but their eyes told a different story, a story of greed. They didn't love him. They loved what he had. One day, a young woman he met online said, "George, I love mature men like you. You have everything I want." When George asked, "What do you love about me?" she quickly replied, "You're successful and can take care of me." That answer hit him hard. He realized that all the attention he was getting wasn't for his heart, but for his wealth. The same world that once ignored his kindness now ran after his money. At night, George sat in his beautiful house, surrounded by expensive things, yet he felt completely alone. He whispered, "I worked so hard to build a life, but what's the point if no one loves me for who I am?" He looked at the mirror and saw the same eyes from years ago, tired, searching, and full of hope. Deep down, he knew he couldn't settle for fake love. He wanted something real, something pure. That night, George decided to find a woman who could love him, not his money. George was tired of fake smiles and empty promises. He had everything he once prayed for: a big house, a nice car, and more money than he ever imagined, but none of it filled his heart. He realized what he truly wanted was not luxury, but love that was real. One morning, as he sat alone drinking coffee, he thought, "If people only love me for my money, I will never know who truly cares about me." That's when an idea came to his mind: a test. He decided to hide his wealth and act like the same simple man he used to be. George stopped wearing expensive clothes and jewelry. He started driving an old, dusty car again and visited small local cafes instead of fancy restaurants. When women asked what he did for a living, he simply said, "I repair furniture." At first, it was disappointing. Many women stopped talking to him after the first meeting. Some gave excuses, others disappeared without a word. Each rejection hurt, but George didn't lose hope. He knew that true love takes time to find. Weeks turned into months, and still, no one stayed. But George's heart remained strong. He often said to himself, "It's better to be alone than loved for the wrong reasons." Then one afternoon, something unexpected happened. While sitting in a small cafe, George met a young woman named Scarlett. She smiled at him kindly and asked how his day was, not about his job or his car. Her voice felt gentle, her eyes honest. For the first time in years, George felt a spark of peace inside him. He didn't know who she was or what destiny had planned, but something told him this meeting was the beginning of something real. That small cafe became a turning point in George's life. The woman he met that day was named Scarlett. She was 24, with warm eyes and a soft smile that made even a cold morning feel bright. When she spoke, her voice carried kindness, not curiosity about money or success, but genuine interest in George as a person. They talked for hours that first day. Scarlett told him she worked part-time at a bookstore and loved simple things: books, coffee, and quiet evenings. She didn't ask about his job, his income, or his car. Instead, she asked about his favorite memories, his dreams, and what made him happy. No one had ever asked George such questions before. The next week, George went back to the cafe, secretly hoping to see her again. And there she was, sitting by the window with a cup of tea and a book in her hand. She waved at him and smiled, as if she had been waiting. That small gesture filled George's heart with warmth he hadn't felt in years. They began meeting often. Sometimes they walked in the park, sometimes they sat for hours just talking about life. Scarlett never seemed to care that George dressed simply or drove an old car. She liked his stories, his gentle nature, and his way of seeing the world. One day, George asked her, "You don't even know what I do. Aren't you curious?" Scarlett smiled softly and said, "I don't need to know what you do, George. I care about who you are." Those words stayed in his heart. For the first time, George felt that maybe, just maybe, he had found someone who could see him for the man behind the money. Months passed, and George and Scarlett grew closer. Their bond was gentle and pure, built on small moments, quiet talks, shared smiles, and long walks under the evening sky. George had never felt this kind of peace before. For the first time in his life, he wasn't lonely. But inside his heart, there was a secret, one he could no longer hide. Scarlett still thought he was a simple man who repaired furniture for a living. She didn't know he owned a successful company or that he was one of the richest men in the city. George often thought, if she finds out the truth, will she still love me? One weekend, he finally made a decision. He invited Scarlett to visit his home. When she arrived, she looked confused. Instead of a small apartment, she saw a beautiful mansion surrounded by flowers and light. She turned to him and whispered, "George, what is this place?" George took a deep breath and said softly, "Scarlett, there's something I haven't told you. I'm not poor. This is my home. I wanted to know if you'd still care about me if I had nothing." For a moment, there was silence. George's heart pounded. He feared she might turn away like everyone else once did. But Scarlett stepped closer, looked into his eyes, and said gently, "George, I didn't love your house or your car or your money. I loved your soul, the kind man who listens and understands." Tears filled George's eyes. That single sentence broke the walls he had built around his heart. For the first time in his life, he felt truly seen. Scarlett didn't just pass his test, she became his answer. After that day, George's life changed completely, not because of his money, but because of love. Scarlett stayed by his side, and together they built something far more precious than wealth: trust. George often thought back to the time when no one wanted to be with him. The pain, The loneliness and the long nights of silence were still fresh in his memory. But now, when he looked across the table and saw Scarlett smiling at him, he knew every struggle had led him to this moment. Scarlett treated him with respect and kindness. She never asked for gifts or luxuries. Instead, she spent time with him, helped him in his workshop, and encouraged him to live simply, just like before. Her love didn't change when she learned the truth, it only grew stronger. One evening, George took her to the same cafe where they had first met. The air was cool, and the lights inside were soft. He held her hand and said, "Scarlett, I once believed that money was everything. But then I met you and you showed me what truly matters." Scarlett smiled and whispered, "Love doesn't see gold, George. It only sees the heart." At that moment, George felt tears of joy roll down his face. He realized that after years of loneliness, pain, and hard work, he had finally found real happiness. As they walked home that night under the quiet stars, George looked up at the sky and whispered softly, "Now I am truly rich." His riches weren't in the bank or in his mansion, they were in his heart. Because for the first time in his life, he wasn't just successful, he was loved. And that was the story of George, a man who lost everything but never lost hope. He proved that no matter how poor you are, if your heart is pure and your intentions are honest, life will always give you something beautiful in return. George spent half his life searching for love and the other half building himself. In the end, he didn't just find love, he found peace. Because real happiness doesn't come from money, houses, or cars. It comes from finding someone who sees your heart before your wallet. So if you're struggling today, if you feel unseen or unloved, remember George's journey. Sometimes God makes you wait, not because you don't deserve love, but because He's preparing someone who will love you the right way. Money can buy comfort, but never true love. If you believe true love still exists, type "True love always wins" in the comments. Subscribe for more real-life emotional stories.